Well, good day, folks. Today I am embarking on a new series where I go through the Secret Treasure Hunt book by Byron Preiss, and I attempt to come up with information that might assist us all in solving the puzzles. This will be a series where I take a look at the author, illustrators, and publisher of the book. I will look at the dedication page to see if there's anything in terms of the dedications that might be clues to the location. I am then going to skip over the images and the verses and go to the back of the book and start looking at each of the individual characters that are listed and try to decipher from 1980, 81, 82, and before who these authors were speaking of. So this mainly will be an audio series. I don't intend to put up any display information or graphics or anything like that. Consider a way in which you could use this as a podcast and just listen to the content, and perhaps maybe it will give you some ideas of what the authors were aiming at providing to you to solve these puzzles. And so I hope to do this in a fashion that may have some pauses. I may be doing research. I may be adding additional research as something strikes me as being important. And if I get a little bit off track, you may just have to use that fast forward button if you think there's some content that you're not interested in. But just a little bit about myself. So I grew up in high school. When this book came out in 1982, I was a junior in high school. I didn't really look into finding the secret puzzles. I think when I was in college, my college roommate might have mentioned this book to me and said something about it. Um, my college roommate was actually an artist, and him and a buddy started a comics and fantasies bookstore. And they actually were running the store while they were going to college. And I think they were probably more interested in this endeavor than I was. So that might have been my first exposure to this book. And I had heard about it from time to time over the years. But I make that point because you're getting information from somebody that was alive when this book came out, somebody who grew up in the environment of the 1980s, who watched television, who read magazines, and had a general sense of what was going on in the world. And so I hope that you will look at those insights as possibly being helpful, because it puts in context what we're talking about. Okay, so just to start out, I have the reprint copy of the book. So I don't have an original. I'm not willing to spend $1,800 or $1,000 to get an original book. I do, based upon the experience of looking at this book, suggest that you do have access to the online drawings if you want to actually try to see what's in these images. Because frankly, the book images are a little blurry and they don't cast a whole lot of assistance in helping to solve what's in the images. So I suggest that if you're buying this book to try to use the images, you're not going to be able to get the fine detail that might be needed in order to come to the conclusion of what you're looking for. And so, the front cover basically has most of the image illustration items that are included in one of the puzzles in the book. And so I don't know why Alex J. would have chosen this particular image for the cover of the book. Maybe it was the most visually attractive. Having a woman, an attractive woman on the cover of your book may increase the foot traffic and may make it stand out among the other books on the shelf. Certainly, it's not as odd in terms of strange things like the underwear on the head and some of the different illustrations in the book, like the face mask, being held up. So it was probably the image that would best You maybe could have used image number one, and they might have debated a little bit between image number one and the image that they chose to put on the cover of the book, because some of these other images are a little, if you put them on the cover of the book, they would, people would walk by them and say, well, what is that? So I think that's probably why that one was chose. Now, in my particular book, on the back of it, it says that the tale begins under or over 300 years ago, and it talks about a little bit of how the vanishing happened. But the information on the back cover that I think is the most interesting for our endeavor here is that it talks about the 12 treasures. It says across North America, these 12 treasures, over $10,000 in precious jewels, are buried. The key to finding each can be found within the 12 full color paintings and verses of The Secret. So it says the key to finding each can be found within the 12 full color paintings. So I guess we're trying to discover some key element or key way or something. And if you notice the back of the book, it has the shape of a keyhole, obviously, in which all of this text is framed. And so the other point that I think the back of the book may allude us to is it says across North America. It could have said just in the United States or in the Americas, or it could have said in the continental United States. So it says across North America. Well, I'm wondering, does this then include obviously Canada, but does it include Mexico? Is Mexico part of Central America? Perhaps we consider that Central America. And so he is saying there's nothing in although he says North America, which he could have just said the United States. And so I think that maybe does lead a little bit of credibility to the fact that there's possibly one or maybe two in Canada. And the fact that the authors, we will later learn, hailed from Canada, will lead some further confirmation that there is probably one of these in Canada. And if you take the founding aspect or the immigration aspect of the fact that there's supposed to be an immigration reference, does North America exclude Alaska? Is Alaska supposed to be excluded? It's part of North America. Many theorists say that there was a land bridge in which immigration occurred, and that maybe the Viking that we're talking about in the first part of the book, Eric the Red, is maybe not the first Viking that made it to the United States, and maybe we're supposed to be looking at possible land bridge possibilities. And include not only Canada, but Alaska. Hawaii. Are we to exclude Hawaii? It says across North America. And so I would wonder, are the islands, Catalina Island gets mentioned in the book, but is this to lead us away from that? I don't know. But anyway, so you have that information on the back of the book. And it's interesting that The Secret is a field guide to all of them. In the back of the book, it has highlighted the Screaming Mimi, the Prep School, the Frigid Daredevils, and the Teen Angels. And you wonder, why do you pick out those four of the many descendants as the ones that you put on the back of the book? Are they to correspond with the image on the front of the book? Or were they just randomly selected by Alex J to be the items that you put in on the back of the book? Now, again, I'm looking at the reprint copy. I don't know if the back of the book of the original Secret has the same information on it. And so, again, we could be looking at some people looking at one data set and other people looking at a different data set. But I'm working off the data set that I have in front of me, which is supposed to be a reprint. So I'm assuming the information on the back is the same as it was presented in the original Secret. Now, if that's different, then we've got a different book designer from iBooksinc.com who redid this book and put different information out for us. And so, again, I'm basing my information from what I have in front of me, what might necessarily be true. Okay, so if you join in, I welcome everybody. I'm going to start by looking at what it says in the book about the particular creators of the book. And so I'm going to start with the editor of the book, Byron Preiss. And I'm just basically going to go through here and point out what we know about him. And so it says Mr. Preiss is the co-author and producer of Bantam's best-selling trade paperback Dragon World, of which Maurice Sedgwick said Dragon World goes far beyond the flashy proto-techniques of contemporary fantasy and fantasy illustration. He's one of the major figures in the renaissance of illustrated fiction in America. Illustrated fiction in America. He is also the author of The Art of Leo and Diane Dillon, a retrospective of two-time Caldecott medal-winning artist and the Beach Boys, the authorized illustrated biography. He produced and edited Bantam's critically acclaimed trade paper book, The Dinosaurs, which is featured in Life magazine and was a selection of 5 book clubs in 1981. He's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford University's Graduate School of Communications. Okay, so in 1982, that's what they wanted us to know about Byron Preiss. Okay, so what they didn't tell us about Byron Preiss is that he was born April 11th, 1953. So assuming this book came out in, let's just say, the last month of 82, and there are people out here who know the actual date. That would make him about, 30 years old when he put this book out. So at age 30 is how old Byron Preiss is. Okay, many of us know he was born in Brooklyn, New York. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 1972, and he had a master's degree in communications from Stanford. He was a teacher at the Philadelphia Elementary School, and he put out an anti-drug comic book called The Block. So even in 1971, we have Byron looking at using a comic book, a way in which to provide information. And then he founded Byron Preiss Visual Publications in 1974. And if you look at his body of work, he is in this illustrator comic fantasy genre, if you will. And so if you look at some of these works, you've got that. His other publications up to the point included Alfred Bester's The Stars, My Destination. It was a 2-volume graphic novel illustrated by Howard Chaykin. And so the idea is that it appears that what the publisher of this book had in his mind is that we should be able to communicate with a visual image what our thoughts are about something. And I think that this was his goal, was to proof of concept, the idea that you can have a visual publication. And that might be, I think, what he was trying to get at with The Secret in the book and the way it was laid out and presented. Okay, up until that point, he had done a number of other things with Dragon World, with Doubleday in 1979. And so you get the idea of what genre he's working in. Okay, so he was married to Sandy Mendelsohn, and he had a couple of daughters. I think he lived for a time in San Francisco, lived for a time in another different areas. And so here we have a 30-year-old Byron Preiss who is just published the book, The Secret. Okay, so let's look at some of the other people involved in the book. And it's interesting the way in which they listed Byron as the last person on the data set in the back of the book. And they started out with Sean Kelly and then and then Ted Mann. So I'm going to jump over to Sean Kelly. What they wanted us to know about Mr. Kelly in 1982 was that he was a newspaper reporter, a radio actor, an advertising agency copywriter, and college teacher of children's literature and Victorian history. And he did all that before he left Canada. He joined and was currently the editor of National Lampoon magazine at the time of this printing. And he co-wrote and did lyrics for the musical review Lemmings and edited Heavy Metal magazine. He has a written comedy for television with Steve Martin, Jonathan Winters, and Robert Klein. And for children's television, Young People's Concerts, Drawing Power Series, and Schoolhouse Rock. Well, I grew up. I remember Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock was this thing that came on ABC television on Saturday morning or during a commercial break. And it had these things like conjunction, junction, what's your function, and, but, and, or. And then it went on from there explaining what a conjunction was. It also had, Schoolhouse Rock also had one that went something like, I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. And it went on to explain how a bill passed through Congress. And so that gets you an idea of what Schoolhouse Rock was all about. And all of these were animated, by the way. These were animated cartoon video series on television. In 1982, in order to produce an cartoon video for television was not just a simple process in 1982. There was no video editing, high-end equipment to just simply type your idea in and have an AI generator produce that. So producing these Schoolhouse Rock, 1 minute segments actually probably took more time than you can even imagine and more resources than you can even imagine in order to do stop motion in order to get the production of that. Now, by the time we rolled around to late 82, 83, computer science was increasing its ability to do those types of things. But I'm just saying that, most of these cartoon videos had to be filmed with stop motion technology at that time. And let's see, so he has contributed to sports and op-ed pages of the New York Times and the Not the New York Times, to the 80s, a look back, the Quarterly of Joy Studies, and What's What Book, and Treasure of Human. And anyway, it mentions Irish folk tales and fairy tales for W.H. Smith. Okay, so he's married to Valerie Marchant and has 4 children. So that's what they wanted us to know about Sean Kelly back in the day. The biography on Wikipedia for Sean Kelly shows that Sean Kelly was born July 22nd of 1940 and sadly passed away last year in July. And so 1940, the book was published in 1982. So that makes Sean Kelly nearly 42 years old when he is contributing as an author to The Secret. Okay, so Byron's 30 years old, and here we have an older Sean Kelly. Well, they would have grown up in different generations, not to mention different countries. And so one of the lead writers of your book is 12 years older, or 12 years older than you, and is from another country. Okay, and has worked for National Lampoon magazine. So what is the influence here? You've got an older writer working for a younger book packager, publisher. So Kelly was born on a farm in Cushing, Quebec. Well, just remember Cushing later on, because I think there might be some interesting things. He went to the Loyola College. Oh God, I should have started drinking. I know that's Loyola. I can't say it. Whatever. And so he worked in advertising, copywriting. Was a school teacher again. So here they have the commonality of both being school teachers. And he worked on a quiz show. In 1967, he co-wrote Expo Inside Out, a best-selling but highly unofficial guide to the Montreal's World's Fair in 1972. Okay, so they conveniently left out of the biography of Mr. Sean Kelly in the book The Secret the fact that he had written a guide to the Montreal World's Fair in 1972. Now, I imagine some of the people that have worked on this from these other blogs have had that information and have used it to develop their idea of a Montreal, Canada solve, and that it's at the World's Fair grounds in the St. Lawrence Seaway. I'm not saying that that's not the case, and I'm not saying that it is the case, but it is interesting that we are being led kind of to the idea that maybe since this guy had a background about the World's Fair, that perhaps that's playing into our mind, thinking of where one of these could be. So in 1972, so 5 years later, he migrated to New York City to co-write the infamous off-Broadway mock rock musical Lemmings. He received the Drama Desk Award for his lyrics. So he's a lyricist. So if you're a lyricist, do you play into writing the verses? Maybe. Could be part of his writing goes into those verses. Okay, if you're going to write lyrics to a song or verses to a book, probably some similarities there. How much do you know about the locations in order to have those lyrics, quote unquote, be accurately describing the location? So anyway, there's an album called Goodbye Pop and National Lampoon's Lemmings, in which Christopher Guest, Sean Kelly, Tony Hendra, and others, these sanctified, hallowed touchstones of the rock counterculture. Okay, so you're looking at these frame of reference for Sean Kelly is, 60s, 70s culture, right? Probably a little bit different than that of Byron, 10 years younger. So he worked at National Lampoon from 71 to 78, and then he was a co-editor. He returned as the senior editor in 1981. So what happened in between? Well, in 1977, he was the founding editor of Heavy Metal. It was an adult fantasy magazine. Okay, so I have copies of National Lampoon magazine. And I will just say in 1981, there are so many ads in these magazines promoting Heavy Metal magazine. And, so if you just look through an example of one of these, the Lampoon magazine was basically set up to show you some of the cartoons, and then they promoted Heavy Metal magazine in here quite often. And so there was some, cross promotion between Heavy Metal, having had this guy working at National Lampoon and still having a number of different people. And I don't know, but this New York Confidential comic, it drew my attention because I don't know who the Preiss is on this. So there's this comic that's by Preiss and Reese, and I don't know who Preiss is. I don't know if they ever give it an actual credit to this cartoon in the magazine as to whether Byron was actually working with the comic creative team at National Lampoon, but I don't know. Here's an actual comic that was written by or partially designed by Ted Mann in the National Lampoon magazine. And so if you look at Ted Mann's area of interest, it appears to be the script was written by Ted Mann for this the first suicide attempt comic that came out in National Lampoon. And I'm looking at the National Lampoon magazine that's from September of 1979. So this is the September 79 issue of the magazine. And the fact that Preiss was mentioned there, and I looked through this to try to find out who the extra credit would be for that particular cartoon in this magazine, and I haven't actually been able to find it because I go through the list of the credit page here, and when you look at the credit page in the National Lampoon magazine, you will notice that when I start talking a little bit about the credit page, you'll notice how that the credit page in National Lampoon magazine looks eerily similar to how the credit page and the dedication pages are set up for the inside front cover first page of the book. And, it could just be coincidental that it happened that way. And so I didn't mean to get distracted by those items, but since we're talking about Sean Kelly and Ted Mann and their connection to National Lampoon, it seemed only logical to jump in and talk a little bit about that. Okay, so some of this biography then talks about work that he did after The Secret. Okay, and so one of the interesting quotes is that he worked at National Lampoon from 71 to 78, becoming an editor and a co-editor in 1975. He returned to publication in 81. Sean Kelly, quote, broke his own record for obscurantism several times, reaching an apotheosis with a dense parody of Finnegan's Wake. And so they're basically saying that, at times his humor was a little obscure. Okay, so as a freelancer, he published, and he was been published in Bazaar, Benetton's, Colors, Interviews, Irish American. So the fact that this guy's an Irish American might be of instructive. And also the Village Boys. He was a book reviewer for the New York Times for the children's book section. Okay, so that gives us a little insight into Sean Kelly. So next up, let's talk a little bit about Ted Mann. So Mr. Mann, a native of Canada, is currently a senior editor of National Lampoon in 1982, for which he has written since 1974. So this guy has been at Lampoon magazine for, a similar amount of time as Kelly. He has written teleplays for ABC's short-lived Delta House, Behind the Scenes, and NBC's Drawing Power. He co-edited Slightly Higher in Canada with Mr. Kelly, a frequent collaborator. Okay. So I should start drinking before I do these. But anyway, so he's collaborated with Kelly in the past. And so that's kind of interesting. Oh, I've got the wrong Ted Mann pulled up on my page for the additional information. Where do I have that information? Okay, let's look here. So I pulled this up the other day and looked at when he was born, how old he was. So Ted Mann was a TV writer for National Lampoon. He did the animated series. He's been a Wall Street Journal reporter. He was a New York University graduate, and he's involved in a production called Disco Beaver from Outer Space. So let me see if I can find a new Ted Mann. See if there's any more information about this guy. Yeah, I thought I pulled up the right one, but this is how research kind of goes. Wonder if it's Ted Mann, the reporter, is the guy I'm looking for. It's probably the one. Okay, so here's Ted Mann, the Wall Street Journal reporter. Uh, so he's on LinkedIn. Let's see if he's got a profile here. Wall Street Journal didn't want to give us a whole lot of information about him. Here's some information about Ted Mann, the journalist for the Wall Street Journal. Says he graduated from NYU, but that was way after his stint doing that. And so there's a couple of books that he wrote afterwards. So it looks like, this guy might be one of the ones that wanted to dissociate himself a little bit with The Secret. I think he appears to be about the same age as Sean Kelly. And so, again, he might have been a little older than the other guy. All right, so I talked about those guys. Let's go talk about John Jude Palencar. So moving on to the illustrators. So it says the book wants us to believe that Mr. Palencar's award-winning work has appeared in numerous periodicals such as Ohio and Cleveland Plain Dealer. His illustrations have appeared in 3 shows at prestigious Society of Illustrators and in Distant Stars. He was awarded a scholarship to the 1980 Illustrators Workshop in Paris, and is pursuing careers in both fine art and illustration. Okay, so John Jude Palencar, born February 26th, 1957. 1957. 67, 77, 82. So he's 25 years old when he meets a 30-year-old Byron to get together to do this book. And we've all heard the story of how Byron's father knew somebody who put them in contact with some of these people. So Palencar was born in Fairview Park, Ohio. He developed an interest in horror and science fiction early in life. Okay, doesn't say anything about that in this profile, but he apparently had an interest in horror and science fiction early in life. He dressed up as an alien with a homemade custom latex masks and exhibited a fascination in both scaring others and being scared himself. Okay, this is not my words, by the way. This is what the Wikipedia article has for this guy. So in the 3rd grade, his family moved to Middleburg Heights, Ohio, and he won an award in a 5th grade for a 3-color block print for the Cleveland Plain Dealer newspaper calendar contest. Okay, so here we have a guy who grew up in Cleveland, and when the book was published, we probably didn't know where these casts were at, but we have a guy who grew up in Cleveland, and one of them was found where? Cleveland. And so you wonder, okay, so how much input did he have in this? Here's some instructive information. He attended the Columbus College of Arts and Design, and he had just graduated in 1980 with a bachelor's in fine arts. So it looks like he was on the extended college plan 57, 67, 77. 77 probably would have put you on track for a college graduating degree of 78, 79. So anyway, during his college years, he worked for the American Greetings Card Company. Okay, well, the American Greeting Card Company information here in the John Jude Palancar information might be instructive later on. Because I kind of feel like that these guys that were involved in this put a little bit of their own DNA in the thing that was put out. And if he worked at American Greetings Cards Company, his biggest rival for the company he was working for, and maybe he had aspirations to work for later, Hallmark cards. Because, American Greetings Card Company in 1978, 79, 80, and there was like 3 companies that made greeting cards. So for the younger people watching these presentations, before we had texting devices, before we had Snapchat, before we had those things, the way in which you send a personal note to somebody for a birthday, for a holiday, you went to the store and you bought a card. And the grocery stores all had an aisle where they had greeting cards. And Hallmark actually had in the 1980s their own crown stores. In 1980, you could go to the mall and there would be a store that sold personal notions and greeting cards. That's all they sold in the damn store was, things to decorate a Christmas tree, little notions that you might send to somebody, and greeting cards. That's all they sold in their damn store. That was a business back in 1980. And so, looking at the whole history of the greeting card and looking at the founder of Hallmark Cards and where Hallmark Cards has its corporate headquarters, and the proximity of the Hallmark Greeting Cards Company to a potential location where there might be a second cask hidden. Just saying. Anyway, so while in college at Columbus College of Art and Design, he exhibited work for the Society of Illustrators, and it attracted the attention of Byron Preiss. The result would be an early and prominent assignment in 1982 to illustrate The Secret. Okay, so here we go. We got the guy, from Cleveland, and there's one found in Cleveland. And, did loose lips sink ships? I don't know. I think that the possibility of that happening could be why the one in Cleveland got found. You have questions as to the guy hails from a certain area, and that's one of them that gets discovered. I don't know if there was any connection to this Mid-Park High School with any of those people that found it, wives, significant others, coat pockets that had notes in them, all the stuff that's came out as to what might have happened for that one being solved. Okay, well, I've talked about that guy long enough. Let's move on to Overton Lloyd, another illustrator. So Overton Lloyd was born April. Well, let's read first of all what they want us to know about Mr. Lloyd. So in the book, Mr. Lloyd is a Hollywood-based artist whose illustrations have appeared on numerous record albums in the National Lampoon, Saturday Review, the New York Times, New York Magazine, and the Beach Boys. Perhaps this is how the connection to Overton Lloyd is made in the world of book packaging and book publishing, and an editor of a book, an illustrator. Perhaps that's how that came together. He designed 2 animated short films for the popular groups The Parliaments and the Funkadelics, and stage and costume designs for Uncle Jam Records. Okay, so the reason we may have Overton Lloyd is, again, we talked a little bit earlier about how hard it was to produce an animated video in 1982. Well, here we have Overton Lloyd, who has produced short animated films, okay? Byron was a founder of Byron Preiss Visual Communications, and in a lot of ways he used animation for that. And so it makes you kind of look at this and say, okay, he probably knew Overton Lloyd because he was a leading guy when it comes to animation. And perhaps if you go back to the fact that we talked about this other animator, who animated Schoolhouse Rock, Mr. Sean Kelly, these guys could have all known each other. And it says right now here that it says he did work for the National Lampoon, for which we already know Mann and Kelly were involved. Born April 20th, 1954. So let's go 54, 64, 74, 84 would be 30 years, right? And so 64, 74, 84 would be. So he's 28 years old. So we have a 28-year-old Overton Lloyd working with 25-year-old Palancar, working with a 30-year-old Preiss, and the seniors here are the senior citizens in this group so far are Mann and Kelly, right? And so that's the group we're talking about. So you can do this research on Parliament and the Motor Booty Affair. And the work on these album covers and these albums. But you got to remember, he was pretty early in his career. In 1977, he illustrated a comic book that was included in Parliament's Funkin' Techne versus the Placebo Syndrome, portraying the epic battle between Sir Nose D. Voidiofunk and Starchild. CP Punk mythology. So again, another cartoonist. And this character, Sir Nose, is determined not to dance and is ultimately defeated by Starchild, who is equipped with a bop gun. And so there are several people in history that have been equipped with a bop gun. And you might find a dealy bopper in one of the images in the back. And if you've got this guy with a bop gun and you're talking about a dealy bopper and you wonder what is the dealy and who is Dealey and where was Dealey? And one of the images looks like it has a bullet in it. Well, we'll get back to talking about that when we get later on into this. Lloyd was recognized for his use of computer graphics for his 1982 video for the George Clinton's video called Atomic Dog. So here we are by 1982. We are using some computer graphics. We have Overton Lloyd. We have Byron Preiss Visual Publications. And what they're doing is they're getting themselves into the video animation business as it's ramping up its infancy. 30-year-old, 27-year-old, 30-year-old video production guy right here. So he was born in, I believe, Detroit, by the way. So if you look at Overton Lloyd as being born in Detroit, they didn't tell us that in the book. They didn't tell us that Overton Lloyd was born in New York. No, they didn't tell us that. Yeah, they just kind of left that out. Okay, so we've got that information. I'm pretty sure he's born in Detroit. You can probably check me on that, and if I'm wrong about that, point that out. Okay, so who do we have next? Well, let's look at John Perard. Since 1979, he's worked for Asimov. He's worked for Scholastic's Books. He's worked for Bantam Books. He's worked for the Lincoln Center of Public Arts, and he's currently the manager at the Lincoln City. He graduated from Syracuse University, and he was born in, I think, 1955, and I think he was born in Denver, Colorado. So let's go look a little bit about with John Perard. It says here he was born on 25 January 1955. So doing the math, 55, 65, 75. So he's 27 years old when The Secret comes out. So we got these guys kind of clustered in the same age group. And if you look at the summary biography of John Perard and some of his artwork, it's fairly impressive. I went to the biological webpage, or I went to a biographical webpage that his brother puts out, and my computer was hit with a virus. And so if you want to risk going to that webpage, you can get a link to a webpage that was put out by his brother. But it's the list of cover art and interior art that he has done is pretty impressive. But it's instructive to know that he did the cover art for Aries #7 in March of '81, Aries #8 May of '81, and Aries #9 in July of 1981. And these are the only three illustrations, the only three cover art illustrations listed as credits on the summary biography of art published by the isfdb.org, which is basically a database of illustrators. And so it's interesting that his interior art credits up until 1982 was a book called Ragnarok, the Mythic Story of the Twilights of the Gods, and Prismatica. And then Rocket City came out in 1982. Wet Behind the Ears came out in 1982. The Devil at the Door came out in 1982. And then, of course, The Secret came out in 1982. So as far as the number of actual credits and credited artwork that had been done by John Perard up until the point that he was involved in The Secret is a limited data set. However, after that period of time, you have a huge data set of creative credits that have went to Mr. Perard since that time. So you have to maybe look back at Ragnarok and what that was, and that publication and the information in it, and what Aries 1981, what those illustrations look like, to get an idea of how much Byron Preiss would have been familiar with this person's work when he brought them into a limited amount of data to assess the artwork in order to include here. And maybe it was the Ragnarok part that was most, interesting to Byron, that got him on board with this project. Okay, so that gives you a little information about Perard, and so we talked a little bit about him. Let's look at Ben Asen next. So Ben Asen, it says in this book that Mr. Asen's work, which includes editorial and portraiture, has appeared in the Newsweek, the New York Times, and many other publications. He has documented the life of senior citizens and the physically disabled, and has exhibited his work at the Wave Hill Museum, Soho Photo Gallery, and the Wooster Street Gallery in New York. His one-man exhibition. Oh my! We got a phone call. Anyway, so his one-man exhibition, Living for the City, New York, was shown in London, England, and Darmstadt, West Germany, in April and May of '82. He currently resides in New York and has a wife, Betsy. Betsy Ross? Yeah, he's married to Betsy Ross. No, I don't think so. Anyway, so Ben's a pretty out front guy. He appears in a number of the Secret's been to some of the events organized around The Secret, and I don't think I don't know. I don't think he holds a lot of secrets. Because I mean, he was sent to shooting in by his own disclosure in certain locations because he happened to be in Florida. But we didn't know this when the book was published. I'm adding information that has been presented to the community after the publishing. Okay, but I mean, uh, he's a smart guy. He looks at a doll back in 1982 and he goes, where would I want to do a photo shoot of, let's just say, a doll that looks like a conductor, and maybe the conductor's in charge of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, and the doll looks exactly like the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. Where would I want to go take a picture of that doll? Probably on stage, in a place where he's a conductor. I got a doll that really looks a lot like Julia Child. I mean, if the doll looks exactly like Julia Child, and maybe the other doll looks just like James Beard. Okay, I grew up in the 80s. I know who James Beard is, folks. I know who Julia Child is. And I know what the dolls look like. Okay? So I'm a photographer and I'm supposed to go shoot a doll. Well, I don't really know who the doll is, but I'm going to go put the doll in front of a plate, a toaster, and some other stuff in the kitchen. But I don't know who this doll is. I don't know that it's James Beard, and I don't know that it's Julia Child. But I got my camera, and I'm going to take a picture of this doll in front of this place. And so I think a key to understanding the way in which the secret works is to know that the photographer had to have a minimal amount of information about who these dolls were in order to photograph them in the appropriate setting. You can't put the left wing Trog and the right wing Sylph in front of a dish and a frickin' toaster in a kitchen, because they don't belong there. They belong on the steps of a building that looks like it's a government facility. You can't take the warlock and you can't put him somewhere that doesn't look like he should be in a military museum. You can't take the jazz player with a trumpet and have him sitting on the back porch somewhere. Well, you can, but why would you haul him all the way to a certain order to do that? Why would you haul the doll to Florida to take a picture? Why didn't you take the general down there? Why didn't you take Beard down there? Why didn't you take one of the other dolls down there that looks like, oh, I don't know, Lucille Ball or James Dean? Are you going to put James Dean in front of a Kaiser car because Kaiser Aluminum is headquartered in Florida? No, you're going to take him out where he died in the California desert and put him in front of a car because he's a teen angel. He died just like 32 other people did in California that year. So I like your escapability in terms of knowing exactly where these things were secreted. And I don't think you know an actual park. But in order to get your photograph right, and in order to get your location right, you had to know who the caricature the doll was representing. And the key is for us to understand who these dolls and these figures represent. For instance, in the Cleveland puzzle, we've since come to the conclusion, or at least I have, many say that it has to do with the Rockefeller family, and it has to do with James Rockefeller. But I think the extrapolation is that you have a teen angel in the Rockefeller family. And it's the one wearing the explorer's helmet who was supposedly killed by the Azmat tribe, who has a headhunter in the image and a young person with propecia in the image and working through it. You can see how the layers develop. And then you get to where it's at and what the location is. And so if you read the back of the book, you're going to see New Guinea references start to appear. And when you realize that there's some connection between an author at National Lampoon magazine, and if you read the magazines from National Lampoon in 78, 79, 80, they write about that. In 1977, there's actually a story in National Lampoon magazine that's about the Rockefeller that went out looking for information about the Azmat tribe and ends up not coming back. Again, once you start putting this all together, we might be able to figure out exactly what some of these other locations. Okay, so, Ben, I think I can give you a pass on knowing exactly where these are at, but I don't think you've been completely upfront. And the same way with Palancar, and I even go a little further in the fact that the one in Cleveland was found, and that's where you're from. But if you want to then look at how somebody would take a picture of a particular individual and then put them in a scene, you have to know that they knew more than what they say they know. So I'm going to move on to Joellen Trilling. So what they tell us in the book about Joellen Trilling is that Miss Trilling's sculptures have been the subject of 5 shows at the Julie Artisans Gallery on Madison Avenue in Manhattan, where such clients as Elton John. Okay, I have long said that one of these images looks like John Queer, Elton John. And here we have Joellen Trilling, Miss Trilling, having worked with Elton John. Ellen Burstyn. I think Ellen Burstyn might be in the back of the book. I think Cher might be in the back of the book. Julie Christie and Carrie Fisher have purchased them. So here are the client list of Joellen Trilling in 1982, right? And so she knows what some of these people are. So her sculptures have appeared in the Complete Book of Stuffed Work, the Beach Boys, Heavy Metal Magazine again. We all know who went and left. We now know who went and left the National Lampoon magazine and went and co-founded Heavy Metal, and who National Lampoon took advertising revenue from Heavy Metal magazine, right? We now know that connection. And we now know that Joellen Trilling was actually involved in this same Heavy Metal magazine, Man Kelly group, right? So she also has some stuff in Playboy and Q, the Renwick Gallery, the Smithsonian, and she's taught soft sculpture in New York and Kentucky. Oh my gosh. It's telling us in the back of the book that Joellen Trilling is familiar with Kentucky. Is this what the fascination is with the 12 Treasures group and some of these people about there being one in Kentucky? Well, I'm not discounting that possibility at all. And in fact, I think there is one in Kentucky. And so you've got in the back of the book the Dixie Highway, and you've got one of the dolls holding up the Dixie Highway sign. Who's going to be more familiar with the Dixie Highway than somebody that lives in New York and went to school in Kentucky? Somebody, and so I just point that out. Her work was featured twice on Bill Bob's midday live television program in New York. She currently resides in New York. Okay, so that's what we know about Joellen Trilling. Let's see. Where's Joellen? Oh, here she is. Okay, so I found this information about Joellen Trilling on rollmagazine.com, and It basically showed a something that was put together at the side by side at the Wired Gallery, where Joellen Trilling's work and Andrew Wilner, which is her husband, was jointly displaying some work at the Wired Gallery. And you can find out that she's been married for a long time, and she actually grew up in the Hudson Valley, right? And so here we have another artist with some information who basically bridges New York to Canada. So here's somebody that knows a lot about that area between New York and Canada, the Hudson River Valley, if you will. And she went to a college in where'd she go to college? She's done work for Billy Crystal, Letterman, Robin Williams, Carrie Fisher, Madonna. She was born at Huntington, Long Island in 1947. And she grew up in Setauket, Long Island, and attended the State University of New York at New Paltz. Okay, so you have to figure out where New Paltz is, and then get the idea of how she may know a little bit about the upstate New York area. She moved into New York in 1972. Okay, but what I want to give you out of this is 1947. 1947. 57, 67, 77, 82. So she's 35 years old. She's a little older than Byron even at this point when she started working on this particular project. I don't know why they add this information to her dossier. It says that she has a item that is now in the Topeka Shawnee County Library, and it's been there since. And then she also has some in the Ito Doll Museum in Japan, and she's now doing some painting. Okay. Again, I'm going to make the same point about Joellen Trilling's work on The Secret as I did about Ben Ason's work on The Secret. How do you magically craft a doll that looks like James Beard with no apparent instruction, Byron, on what the doll needs to look like or who it needs to look like? How do you construct a doll that looks shockingly like Julia Child when you were given no instruction as to what caricature to make this doll look like? How do you somehow make a doll that looks like Richard Simmons, who had at 1980 became the guy on the scene for fitness movement, headband, all that kind of thing. We had Olivia Newton-John wearing a sweatband and those stretch pants. We had the short wearing Simmons in his little outfit, trotting around, opening up exercise asylums in California and across the country. And so no instruction as to who to make these dolls look like. And so randomly we have a picture of a guy of the doll or an illustration of somebody in a sweatsuit, out in California under a palm tree? Really? Do we have, you're making a doll that looks like Fiedler, Boston Pops, and you have no idea you need to make the doll look like that guy? And I think the one doll is Lucille Ball. But I've done some further research, and there's apparently a washing machine connection between Marilyn Monroe. And if you're looking at Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio, and that whole idea, maybe we've been looking in the wrong city, and that doll's not Lucy Ball. It's somebody else. I don't know. But it just leads yourself to, you had to know who to make these dolls look like. And when I get back to the back of the book and start explaining who these dolls are and what role they played in the 1980s, you're going to say, oh, now I understand why the one in Boston was found, because of the doll that was in the back of the book that was the conductor. And you'll realize, oh, now I understand that the Cleveland image was about the Rockefeller family, and that this doll in the back of the book was referring you to Cleveland or New Orleans or San Francisco or wherever. But I'm hoping that this series maybe brings to light some ideas that other people have probably had over time, and they haven't shared with the community as to who they think these dolls are. They just put these puzzle matches together for us and put it out there and said, "Hey, look, we've got to figure it out. Here's the relevant information." I'm giving you factual information about these people's lives, about who these dolls look like, so that you can make informed decisions about your treasure hunt and go out and find them in the places they're at. Okay, I'm going to start, and my last assessment here is on the Alex J, the designer. So Alex J, the book designer, I could not find very much information about his age, when he was born, etc. And I don't know if this guy on Blogger, this Alex J on Blogger, is the real Alex J that did all this work or not. But on Blogger, there's an Alex J, and he lists, Alex J lists the basically a list of he talks about the island printer, and he just posted something on February 13th about hand lettering. And I don't know if this is the right Alex J, because this is the one I haven't been able to find very much information about. But if it is, he's written recently about Chinese and Korean MSLS students, about Chinese Americans, and the blue, the gray, and the Chinese. Anyway, he seems to maybe be the connection that we might have been missing when it comes to some of the Chinese aspect of this. But on this Blogger, if this is the real guy, there's like a whole bunch of magazine covers that he has illustrated. I mean, his body of work is pretty strong, or designed. And so I wish somebody in the comment section, maybe you can give me some more real information about Alex J and who Alex J was and how that all worked. But the last nugget I'm going to talk about Alex J is, so when you go to the inside book cover where it has on page the actual credits, it says here that Alex J was the illustrator with Vincent, or the cover painting was by Palicar. The cover and book design was by Alex J with the assistance and support from Kathy Connolly and Vincent. Now, I have tried to find out who Kathy Connolly is, and I haven't been able to find Kathy Connolly. And I'm wondering if Kathy Connolly might just be a made-up person, because we know Vincent, a one-eared cat, is probably just a made-up thing, because that's going to be Vincent van Gogh, who famously removed his ear, who was practicing homeopathic medicine under the influence of some oddball doctor, and ended up shooting himself. And so I just don't know if there's a there, or if there's not a there on that one. And so I wasn't able to get much on Alex J, unfortunately. And so that's the one that's kind of going to be a mystery. And if somebody's got some relevant information, post it in the comment section of this video. Okay, so I'm going to take a kind of a lunch break here, and I'll come back. And in episode number 2 of The Secret broadcast that I've started, I'm going to go through the dedication page and see what we can find out about the people to whom this book is dedicated, a little more about the Alex J and my comments on that, and then look at some of these people that where the items were shot and who he credits, like this Louis Wolff, the Jack Romanos, Nita Hoffman, Sally Williams, F.X. Flynn, and some of these people that and then he especially thanks Barry Denenberg for some editorial help and enthusiasm of an unusual endeavor. And so I'll be back. Hope you've enjoyed this first in a series on The Secret by Byron Preiss. I look forward to when you join me next time. Have a great day.